Hi, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Youth, a program geared towards talking about challenges that youth today feel a little iffish about. Last week, we spoke about child molestation and its impact on the youth. And this week, we will be talking about depression, especially in the Christian youth, and wondering if this is normal. But before we go into our lively discussion, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And click the notification bell so you can get updated when we go live. All right, so today I have with me the lovely Lady Roxanne. And Roxanne White is a mental health advocate and mental health and wellness coach for the NCU debate team. She's currently pursuing a degree in communications at NCU and also hopes to become a certified mental health coach soon. Prior to this, she completed a bachelor's of science degree in psychology at NCU and worked as a youth development practitioner with the Ministry of Youth Education and Information. Her aim is to use her knowledge and experience to raise awareness of the importance of mental health, particularly amongst the youth. To this end, she produces a monthly mental health feature for the Department of Communication Studies, as well as uses her social media platforms to share tips and strategies she has used in her own mental health journey. With this hope, it will help others. Now, welcome, Roxanne, to
Thank you for
Let's
having me.
Great to have you here. So, but before we go into our discussion, I met Roxanne a couple years ago. Not a couple, it was just wedding. And,
Probably 3 years, 2 or 3 years. So it's a
so,
couple. More than that.
yes, somewhere there. And when I met Roxanne, at first, but I realized she was she's a cool personality. She blunt, she would tell us straight up, say, stop
Hmm.
thinking as a student. So that should have left some impact in my life. So depression, Roxanne, tell me, what is depression?
Well, in a nutshell, depression is a mood disorder which comes with a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest. It kind of affects how you think about things, and it leads to other emotional and physical problems. So that's it in a nutshell. It's a mood disorder.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've even in my own journey with this phenomenon, and even looking at what depression is, many persons believe sometimes that depression is, I mean, sometimes we use the word so loosely, I'm depressed, not knowing it goes beyond just having a particular mood or even just feeling sad one day and tomorrow you're up again. But it's actually a deeper, more misunderstood mental health issue. So when we think about mental health and some of the signs that you probably exhibit, can you talk to me about, can you just look at a person out there and say, that person is depressed, or is it deeper than that? Actually, hearing me?
Okay. I'm hearing you now, but I think I got the essence of what you were asking. The signs of depression. How can I tell if somebody is depressed or not? That's what you were asking.
Yes.
Okay. So with depression, as you rightly said, people tend to abuse the term a lot. So as soon as them feel any type of way, any little stress, me depressed, yeah, man. So when people say that, I have to ask them, when you say you're depressed, Is it that you just temporarily feel sad about a situation, or is this an extensive thing? Now, typically, for some persons, there are some general symptoms that you can observe, and then you have some other people who you're not gonna really see those things.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, remember we talked about the fact that the has a kind of persistency to it. So the symptoms or signs of depression that I'm going to talk to you about, typically a person who is experiencing these things have to experience it for majority of their day, and this is like almost every day, if not every day, for at least 2 weeks. So there's that time frame that kind of gives you an
Yeah.
idea. So it's you feel this way almost for the entire day. You may feel this almost every day or every day, and these types of feelings are persisting over a period of 2 weeks or more. So persons who are depressed, they have this persistent sadness, anxiety, or them just have this empty mood. If you ask, how are you? The answer is continuously is either they don't know how they feel or they're just feeling sad. And even when something great happens, there's just this underlying sadness that they can't seem to get rid of. A person who's depressed might have feelings of hopelessness, or they can be continuously pessimistic. No matter what good happen, them find something negative in it. You have some persons who are very irritable, then
Mm.
there are persons who there are feelings of guilt and worthlessness, and they feel very helpless.
Yeah.
If you're used to like basketball, or if you're used to like photography or drawing, you might find that you have absolutely no interest in that, or the things that you typically enjoyed, there's a lack of interest, or a loss of interest in these things. Then these people may constantly say, oh, they feel tired. No matter how much sleep they get, still feel tired and just lacking in energy. These persons may seem to be sluggish, or when they speak a lot more slowly than usual, like they're taking all this time to process what it is that they're thinking about. There, there are things like difficulty concentrating, they can barely remember things. The simplest of decisions become this whole mountainous thing. Something as simple as, what am I going to wear to work? What am I going to wear to school? Become a whole 2 hour, 1 hour decision, something that not supposed to take you more than 5 to 10 minutes to figure out. You get me? Um, then you have those who have difficulty sleeping. Some people may not be sleeping at all. Then you have those people who may be sleeping too much. And then for others, 1 minute they must sleep enough. The next time, them hardly asleep. There's this constant change. Then appetite. Somebody who used to eat a lot, all of a sudden you realize that they're picking at their food and not really eating
Yeah.
the things. Yeah. And then one of the things that you can know that somebody's really depressed, or they have constant thoughts of dying all the time, or constant thoughts of actually killing themselves, or they may actually attempt it. You see them cutting themselves and them because stuff there. And the last thing that I would mention is you have aches and cramps and body pains and digestive issues and whatever, and you can't pinpoint what is causing it.
Yes.
And when you go to the doctor and you're getting medication and stuff, it doesn't seem to be working. So those are some of the general signs.
Things. And as Roxanne mentioned, that you have to have a consistent exhibition of these symptoms before you can say you're depressed. And the DSM-5 gives you a perfect illustration of that. So you can look it up um, before you're diagnosed. Don't self-diagnose yourself. Go to a psychologist or a trained counselor to get diagnosed. And
Or
what I realized,
even your physical health doctor, they
yes,
too have that basic knowledge. You can share it with them as well.
yes. And what I realized is that even in Jamaica, we too grapple with this because even I realized that at least there's the 3% of the population grapple with this mental illness, and that does not even include persons who haven't even recognized that this is a mental health issue that they need to deal with. And typically, women are more predisposed to this
Yeah.
mental challenge. And we're not just speaking of just things that is out there in the media. I have experienced depression in my lifetime. And this is not something that I self-diagnosed. This is something that was actually confirmed by counseling psychologists to say, based on the symptoms and how long it has been happening, you're suffering from severe depression. Or, no, it was mild depression. Mild depression to the point where I had to be on medication, which I didn't take for long because I just didn't like how it made me feel. But with
Mhm.
that said, what are some of the causes of depression?
The causes of depression are so many,
Hmm.
and some of them are things that we don't even consider. So let's talk about some obvious things first, and then we talk about the not so obvious things. If you are in a situation that's highly stressful over a continuous period of time,
Hmm.
at some point in time you might find that you encounter depression.
Hmm.
If you are being bullied at school or in the workplace, that can be depression. If you've experienced any kind of loss, so it could be that you were in a relationship and your relationship mash up, or somebody close to you, whether it's a family member or a friend or somebody you looked up to, died, that can trigger depression. If you are in any type of abusive situations, whether it is like physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, which is a level of abuse that many people don't really think about or
Yeah.
are aware of. I have neglect. So you're in a family where, say for example, a parent has 3 or 4 children,
Hmm.
and you tend to find that the middle child gets left out a lot. So the first child came, and that child got a lot of attention,
Hmm.
especially if the second child didn't come until probably like some 4 or 5 years later. They would have had X amount of time where it was just them and the parents. Then the middle child comes and starts to get some attention and stuff, and then boom, next pitney come. And so you find that the kind of care and attention that this middle child used to get, they're not getting it anymore. So these things can contribute to depression. Then you have things like poor eating habits, like people don't realize just how much their diet
Hmm.
affects their mental health, especially if you're partaking in stuff that has a lot of sugars, a lot of refined and processed foods, because the sugar enters your bloodstream quickly, you go up on the high and then you come down. So that constant fluctuation in it can contribute to depression. And then you mentioned that women are more predisposed to
Yeah.
being depressed because we have the different hormones going on. So, chemical imbalances in the body
Yeah.
or in the brain, or if you have any underlying illness that you're aware of or probably don't even know that you have, these are some of the things that can contribute to depression.
Yes, and just for those who are listening who want to know that you're alive and you're well, so you can just send your questions in the chat, and we can answer them as best as we can. And one of the things, as we've emphasized on Christian, especially on the Christian aspect, because one of the misconceptions that I find with this is that many persons, and this is a misconception that I personally have had as well. If
Mm,
you're going through a particular thing as a Christian, that means something is wrong with your faith,
mm,
something is wrong with your relationship with God, and a whole works of it. As I said before, I had the experience of depression. And struggling with this over 10 years, I didn't know what it was. I thought it was just a part of my personality. I
mm,
thought it was just me being an overly introspective person, like my space. Sometimes I'll be sad for no reason. I'll be up and about, and then all of a sudden I just don't want to see anybody. And it was
Mm-hmm.
my third year, because being in the helping profession, they always say that they always encourage you to go to a counselor to ensure that there are things in your life that are resolved before you seek to go out and help persons. And it was towards my final year that it dawned on me that I really had an issue. I really needed someone to talk to truly know how to cope. And it was after I sought help that I began to understand that what I was going through, I wouldn't say it was normal, but it was okay that I was able to identify that this was something that needed further attention, and going to the different therapies and all of that helped. But now when it comes down to Christian principles and it comes down to the Christian, oftentimes we believe that we can just pray it off, or we can just stay a little longer at the altar, because
Mm-hmm.
as a Christian, you shouldn't be depressed. How can you be depressed? And that is why so many people, young people, don't want to sometimes vocalize it, because they are afraid of being shunned. They are afraid that what they are going through is not something that should be spoken openly, especially when you're a prominent leader in the church, or whether you're a pastor's kid or a deaconess kid. It leaves a stigma there. So, Roxanne,
Mm-hmm.
let me ask you this. Based on your professional and striving professional aspirations, do you think that a person who goes through depression, especially a young person or old person or whoever it is this normal for a Christian to be experiencing depression?
So that's kind of like a loaded question, but my first response would be before a person is Christian, a person is human, right? And the reality of the situation is that when our parents sinned in the garden, we became susceptible to a lot of things, right? When if somebody gets cancer or somebody has diabetes or something of the sort, we do not lambast them and say it is because of a lack of faith. But I find it very unfortunate that an illness, while it is less obvious in terms of the fact that it's mental, so you can't necessarily see the manifestations or the signs that it's present, doesn't change the fact that it's very much present. So we are human first.
Yeah.
And because of our human experience, we are going to encounter these different things. And especially here in Jamaica, I find, and this is a conversation I'm always having with people, I find that we are a country that seeks to, we don't address trauma.
Mm.
I don't think we do a very good job generally in addressing trauma. Our way of dealing with things is to create memes and joke about it and all and well. Mind you, having a sense of humor and laughing about stuff has its place. At some point in time, you're going to have to address these things. And when you're going to say to somebody who is having a human experience that it is wrong for them to be ill, that doesn't sit well with me. And in my own experience with it, I remember always being aware that something was wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And like you, I've always been an introspective person, even as a child coming up. So I figure, and when I'm around certain people, I pick up on the vibe and the energy. Some people talk about being an empath. I'm not too sure if I'm an empath and all of that fancy stuff that they talk about. But I pick up on stuff that's happening in my environment and it would be affecting me. And even when something good happened, I couldn't quite
Yeah.
put a finger on it. And I remember asking somebody that I looked up to, uh, uh, I don't remember the exact question, but I do remember the response, and that response stuck with me for a very long time. Christians are supposed to depress.
Mhm.
So because Christians are not supposed to be depressed, it ended up making me more depressed because
Yeah.
I am experiencing this thing and I'm praying about it, I'm praying about it, I'm praying about it. And I just pray, fasting and pray.
Mm.
And other people are praying for me and so, but I'm still experiencing this. So because I internalized the message that it was because of my lack of faith
Mhm.
I was experiencing this thing, I began to feel guilt and shame on top of
Yeah.
what my already experienced. Can you imagine putting guilt and shame with
Together.
depression?
Oh, yeah.
It was horrible and it was very, very painful. And then on top of that, when I went to university and started studying psychology, and although being aware that there is stigma attached to mental health and knowing that there's the need to get help because of the thinking that Christians not supposed to be depressed,
Yeah.
my thing was to try to pray more, try to involve myself in church more, and just do more and do more. And I went on a downward spiral. I burnt all the way out, and it got to the point where I start say, well, since my lack faith and it clear say me and God not get no closer, might as well me
Yes.
just lower him out and go and live my life and just accept that this is going to be my life. And I think that is what happens to a lot of our young people.
Yeah.
And I think that's unfair. It's unfair to them. It's unfair for you to be having an actual illness, something you're struggling with, and to hear that it's because of a lack of faith. That not cute. That not nice.
Yes, very much because even as you made mention of that, and when I became more accepting of the fact that depression was actually or is really something that is serious, and when I realized that after seeking help, and I realized that by that time you seek help, you're supposed to on your merry way now, you're not supposed to struggle no more. And as you made mention, I did all these things as well. I fasted, I prayed, and I said, and I cried out to God. I said, "Hey God, me I struggle with this, you know." And
Mhm.
I remember the lowest I've ever been. I was so depressed to the point where I didn't want to get up out of my bed. Getting out of my bed was like the most sorrowful thing. I wanted to just lie in my bed all day and
Mhm.
just either be in a dark room and
I
either
just
just cry,
I
sleep.
just yeah.
Food was not my friend. And when we say food was not my friend, it was obvious because I lose couple pound. So when I realized that me, I was crying out to God, and as I made mention, and if he likes say, young God not getting any closer. I I recognize something that, and it dawned on me when I was one day lying in my bed, and I felt, you know, when I feel like a dark, you just feel the cloud everywhere you go, that dark cloud will just follow you and all of these things. And I began to do a little bit more research, not only on the psychological aspect and the clinical aspect, or spiritual aspect, because I realized that even in our physical sphere of things, mentally and our environment, all of that, spiritually, we know that something are going. Because
Mhm.
in terms of that spiritual depression, I name it spiritual depression because I looked into the Bible, and when I looked on, I narrowed in on some persons in the Bible would have gone through this, and David stood out to me most. Because when I look on David's writing in the Psalms 13, Psalm 42, and all these other Psalms of lament, I recognize that David went through a period in his life when he said, Lord, how long? My tears has been to me like meat day and night. It
Mhm.
seems to David that was in a perpetual stage of, and for me, I saw that as depression because David would move from one mood to the next. He would say, God, why? How long would you forget me? And then David would say, I will hope in you, Lord. And for about three times
Yeah,
within the passage, he would say the same thing. And I was like, I'm like, this man,
I've read some sometime. I wonder if David was bipolar. Like,
I
brother,
was like, this
thoughts
man,
and you just my soul is sorrowful. And then the next minute I will praise thee, oh Lord. I'm like, what is going on here? Are you bipolar, sir?
yeah, man. When I look at it, I say, and then I look at it as Elijah, even though his one
Mm,
probably look like it's kind of short, because right after Elijah got defeat the how much hundred of false prophets, he ran, went under a tree, said, God,
mm-hmm,
take my life, because I'm the only one left, and right now that even food me no want to eat until the God had to bring him, allow a raven to bring him food. So I recognize that even the noblest of men in the Bible, and people who we deem as great spiritual leaders have gone through something that's similar to what we go through. And when I look on this spiritual aspect and how this spiritual depression, as I would coin it, that though yes, the life of a Christian is marked by, God never tell us the road in terms of we're not experiencing challenges when we come look on our life, when we look on things that would have gone through our environment and we won't feel down. Yes, others are able to go through it with ease, but we have to recognize that we all handle the situation different. The way
mm-hmm,
how I handle a situation may not be the way you handle a situation, and I'm more likely to plunge. And one of the things that I found was challenging, especially for me, that was that kind of you have to identify your triggers, because what I realized for me, I am sometimes a perfectionist. When things don't go the way that I plan it, and certain things, everything's supposed to all right, make me plunge. Come and say,
mm-hmm,
hey, oh, and then I realize that that mindset is very important.
mm-hmm.
If
Yes,
your
yes.
mindset is not in a place where you can look on a situation and say, I faltered today, and tomorrow, by the grace of God, I'm going to not falter in the same way, because I realize that this is my trigger. So we want to get talk time, Roxanne. But remember, those who are here to drop a
Yeah,
question, comment, so that we can know that
about
you're
what
here.
I jumped in for a while ago. I find it interesting. Let's backtrack a little bit. Let's talk about Elijah first, because he I relate to Elijah a lot right now. Right. So I've just been studying him in the context of mental health. And you will
Mm,
find when you really look at the story, you will see that some of the signs of depression that we mentioned before, Elijah would have experienced some of them. The thing is, we don't know the timeline between the
yes.
different experiences, right? Because so the Bible don't give you everything in between. But first, I have to think about the fact that Elijah had been in a space where he is constantly having to preach to the people, and he will ever so often they responded in a way that made him feel like revival was going to come. Right. So in a few mind, revival will come because the people them respond. And by the time them respond in a one positive way, something happen and then go back to whatever. And it's constantly being like this. And the king Ahab accused him of being a troublemaker in Israel. So can you imagine? Yeah, you're in a working environment, because that was his work. He was a prophet. You're in a working
Mm,
environment where you're constantly in opposition with everybody else.
mm,
That in and of itself was enough to make him stress out and depressed, right? Then you have a situation now where God say, okay,
mm.
no rain for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
No rain for 3.5 years. And Him take for himself and they by himself. Drunk or cousin are feed. I mean, ravens are feeding him. So he would have
Yeah.
been by himself for a period of
Mm.
time. So,
Yeah.
an environment where you're constantly feeling like you're at odds with everybody, and know for a significant stretch of time you are by yourself. Right? Then God send him to the what is the widow of Zarephath, or I can't remember the
Yeah.
name right now.
Yeah.
And while he's there, the woman's son dies, and she starts saying, "Look how me did they are ready for me, and my son dead by himself, and now my son dead. Why you come here, come stress out my life?" She was thinking about the fact that for the entire period of time he was there, she was being blessed. I remember when he went to where she was going to eat her last meal with her child and
Okay.
wait for death. You
Mm.
get me? So he has been going through a significant amount of stuff. Now him have this big evangelistic thrust, and God said, "Kill off the false prophet them and whatever." So he was expecting that off the back of that, everything they got alright. So in the moment now, Jezebel catch him off guard with the threat. And that was enough to send him back in a space where, because listen, it can I personally don't think that this thought of wanting to die would have been just come up so. You understand? Because he would have been working, 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 and he wasn't aware that there were other people who were standing with him.
Mhm.
So all along him that they are wrestling and things say, him alone I go through this. So
Yeah.
when we see him come to that breaking point now, when we mentioned feelings of helplessness. When we reach the point where him say, "This now work, I'm me alone, this." And imagine me now, I'm no better than my father, might as well me just don't, God might as well just kill me. And then we see where he started isolating himself again,
Yeah.
run gun left everybody. Then on top of that, he start oversleep. He wanna sleep so much that the angel have to wake him up and say, "Eat something." And as he eating, go right back to sleep.
Yeah.
You get me? And Elijah was taken up into heaven. So if it's a case where as Christians we're not allowed to experience these different things, but depending on God to get us through day by day, then might as well everybody just do what they might do and just live. We see Elijah going through these different things, but Elijah
Yeah.
is taken up into heaven. And God knew from long before we even have what we call the Bible, that we would struggle with these things as part of our human experience. There are so many scriptures in the Bible that speak to caring for our mind and guarding our mind and all these different things. Now,
It's
so may I
a
say,
reason. Yeah.
if as Christians we're not supposed to experience these things, and why God put them in the Bible so we can have
Yeah.
them as a guide for when we go through these things.
Exactly. Because he knows, and I'm happy that you touched on that point, because I think they said that there's hundreds of promises, and majority of them is here to encourage us whether we go through fear, doubt, because he knows these are real emotions that people will deal with, and these come as a result of sin. It comes as a result that we have to deal with things in our daily life, whether personal or otherwise. Now we have a question here. You can tackle it because seeing that you're the mental health coach here. So what can be done to help that Christian youth who face depression?
Okay, what can be done to help a Christian youth who face depression? One of the things that's important is
Hmm.
to acknowledge to that young person
Have this
that
problem.
it is okay. It is okay. Validate their experience. Remind them that as a human, you're going to have these different experiences. It doesn't mean that you are any less Christian. It doesn't mean that you are any less faithful. It's just one of the things that comes with being human. Then it would be important to have a conversation with this young person for them to describe what it is that they've been experiencing and how long they've been experiencing this thing. Because remember that everybody has a time that they go through when their mood change and them feel kind of down or whatever. What makes the difference is how long you've been experiencing this. So it would be important to have that conversation to understand how long you've been experiencing this. And say, for example, you have a conversation, you're asking about diet, you're asking about lifestyle habits, like in terms of exercising and that stuff and stuff like that, and you get an idea of what is happening or not happening. It could very well be that how the person is eating contributes to why they're feeling that way. The lack of activity might contribute. If it's a case where, remember we mentioned like abuse or constant stress, if it's a stress management issue, then there would be the need to help the young person come up with effective ways to manage stress. It could be that they don't have very good stress management skills, so that's something that they need to be taught. In the case of like abuse and something there, ideally, if you can get the person out of that situation, that would be probably the best. Well, not probably, that would be the best thing to do, but it's not always possible. So persons who have any sort of knowledge about mental health would need to become involved in that experience. So I know, if I know a counselor, I refer the young person to a counselor. But also the young person must be willing to go to the counselor, because that is very important as well. If you're not willing to go to the counselor for whatever reason, then that kind of help that you would be able to get, you won't get it because you're not accessing the person. And helping the person develop new ways of thinking, because some of the things that cause depression has a lot to do with certain experiences that we may have had and wrong ways of thinking. So maybe you're depressed because somebody tell us as a Christian you're not supposed to be depressed, and that is causing the whole thing. So you would need to re-educate yourself. Like, even though you have me as this expert in mental health, anything, I'm not an expert, not yet. I hope to be one day, but not yet. What I do is pretty much share from the different tips and strategies that I've used for myself. And I share it with people, hoping that if they try it, then it may work for them. So those are some of the things I would say can be used to help a Christian young person. I don't know if I've answered your question. If you were looking for a specific answer, then you could probably rephrase the question so we could provide something more specific.
Yeah. So one, also another thing that I find very interesting, that accepting where you are is very
Mm,
important. You know, so many times we go into this self denial that nothing wrong with me, you know, and I don't need help, and we lose out from truly being healed. And
mhm,
when and I had an experience, so I'm not saying that I'm on a smooth path and everything is jolly dally, but I've seen where I have made progress. And I remember going to a particular church and we were doing a program there, and you know the Holy Spirit does a share his story. And when I shared it, it just so happened that somebody in the audience, an older person, was experiencing depression.
mhm,
She was going through it. And I mean, when after church was finished and the person her daughter approached me and said, "No, my mother is experiencing this. Talk to her for me." I didn't feel qualified to talk to her because, first of all, struggling with it, you know, I would have gone through over little hurdles there and there, but I didn't feel like I was capable of doing that. But I spoke to her, and I would have gone through some of the things that I would have talked to her about some of the things that I would have gotten from my counselor, and I realized over a period of time, talking to her and you helping her, giving her some of the same tips, she slowly began to improve. And I saw the importance of sharing your story, because so many times we go through things, and I'm not saying that everybody be willing and comfortable sharing certain things.
Mhm.
But when you are comfortable and you reach that stage where you can impact somebody else's life, then it makes a tremendous difference, because as I said before, some things are just taboo for us in the church to speak about. And
Yeah.
until yeah,
No, I was saying that sometimes the only help we need to give people is to let them know that they're not alone.
yeah.
Like Sabbath, well, the weekend past, I was at the Dear Church Girl virtual retreat, and I was asked to do a Bible study on church hurt. And
Mm,
I was speaking of how church hurt contributed to an extended period of depression for me, because
mm,
depression is something I've struggled with coming up from. I was probably like 7, 8,
mhm,
but at different points in time, we didn't know that that was the issue. So I would be experiencing different health issues. So one time there were hives all over my body, my hair was falling out, and a bunch of stuff. And we didn't realize that it was due to mental illness, because depression in children sometimes doesn't manifest the same way it does in like young adults and adults, even though
mm,
some things are generally the same. And I was just sharing with the ladies, and I was telling them of how what was the point that really got me to be like, okay, I really need to get some help, was in 2018. I think you were on practical in 2018. 2018, y'all were sitting in the conference room.
2018 or 2019? 2019, 2019.
2019? Oh, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, 2019. But in
Yes.
2018, I would have been in the office. And my brother messaged me, and he said that our mutual friend died, and I cannot tell you why. But the first thing that came to my mind was suicide. And
2019, everybody tell that story, yes.
yes, yeah. And when he confirmed that that was it, and to know that I was planning to go home, because me they have a bottle of red wine in the fridge, and I had some tablets, because I was very unhappy at work. I was very unhappy overall. I just, no matter what would happen, there was just
Yeah.
this feeling of sadness that wouldn't leave. I mean, I think go home, and I go home, and I used to have a habit of deactivating my social media pages for stretches. So I would deactivate my page for like 6, 7 months. As it relates to Facebook, I deleted my Facebook account altogether. And at that time, I was the most active on Facebook.
Mm,
So we kind of just start plan this thing, and it was scary because I actually got to the point where I had a plan of how I was going to die.
mm,
And the day I leave, I left work early. I'm gonna go straight to one counselor's office and be like, I need some help. And when I was sharing this with the ladies, 200 plus ladies from all over Jamaica, all over the world, different denominations, I had people messaging me afterwards to say, "Oh, I'm really grateful that you shared the experience." Sometimes all people need is to know that they are not the only
alone.
person. So
And if
when I ask the question, what can be done? That's probably like one of the most important things. Let young people know that they're not the only ones.
yeah, man, because even as I said, even sharing that story, it kind of reinforce certain things in me because even sometimes when I feel like I'm going to relapse, I have to remember all the struggles and the weight loss and all of the health issues that come with it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's not worth it because they put yourself in this deep pit that is, I find it so difficult. I mean, it's so easy to go into it. You just need to get a little discouragement, a plunge,
Mm-hmm.
and along with because and we're not underestimating the power of prayer because I believe that God can just speak and that mental health issue just. But we should not underestimate the fact that we should get help. Seek God, yes, and He works through us to create this this attitude to to regulate it because I mean the Bible tells us that when we keep our mind fixed on Christ, then everything else is like it fades in darkness. But
Mm-hmm.
once we identify our triggers and we know that this is what triggers me into depression, we're supposed to automatically catch up ourselves and we say, you know what, God help me not to plunge into this. So if somebody out there, a youth is going through depression, whether it be because of trauma, whether it be because of your environment, whether it be because you were predisposed to it by the genes of your mother or your grandparents had the gene and you got that gene and you know it was activated, then we know that for a fact that help can you can overcome this thing. Don't become another statistic where by you, because of this thing you're allowed to control your life and you end up you commit suicide because I was looking at an article today and it was talking about a pastor of a church that he would go to church every Sunday and he would preach, but he ended up committing suicide because for so long he was struggling with depression and nobody knew about it because he
Mm-hmm.
put on a facade, he put on this, you carry yourself in a way where nobody thinks that you have problems, and that is we're good at doing that. We're good at hiding our feelings in church clothes. We're good at hiding our feelings with a smile. We're good at hiding our feelings. And as I said, for years, I struggled with depression from the age of 6 and didn't even realize that it was depression. As I said, I thought it was just my personality. And when you realize that, and I too had suicidal tendencies, when my mother found out I had depression, I think I was going to preach at a church and I decided to share this story for the first time publicly. Because everybody, as I said, everybody thought it was just Rochelle, And when she heard, she was like, I didn't know you struggle with depression because I'm the type of person who was very
A lot of
secretive.
people don't know. A lot of people
You
don't
don't,
know the signs and whatever. I give God thanks for my mom because she realized that point and she took
do
us to a
things.
child psychologist. But I think
Mm.
one of the things that needs to be done as a church in general, and I've seen, mind you, I've seen where it is becoming practiced more, but I still don't feel like it's enough where persons need to be yes, just like how them have different workshops on evangelism and all of these
Yeah.
things. They need to have workshops on these because the reality is when you read First Corinthians 12 and it talks about the spiritual gifts, it talks
Yeah.
about healing, right? Mental health professionals are given the gift of healing, just like how a neurologist or one of them other doctor there, they have been given that particular gift. Mental health practitioners have been given that gift. So why is it considered a lesser gift than the rest? The gift of healing is not just a person being able to pray and healing just come like that.
But
God,
it's a stigma in Roxanne. It's a
Yeah,
stigma. Because once you go
yeah.
into counseling, I'm telling you, when I was so afraid to go up to counseling center on campus because once you go down there, so you know something is wrong with you, and nobody wants to be labeled as the nutcase or the person who has a problem. So you realize people go down counseling center, and that's a I mean you pay for it in your school fee, right? So but in this sense where don't allow the stigma of people or the stigma that people will place on you to prevent you from seeking help. Jamaica, we know Jamaica is a place where nobody wants to be labeled as being having a mental illness. But
Mm-hmm.
the fact is these things are reality. We have we have a question here. It says, are there any Christian books along with the Bible that can be recommended? And what Bible text can be used for depression?
All right. Just give me a moment. Let me read for a book. Let me read for a book. Switch on Your Brain by Dr. Carlin Leaf. Up until this point in time, I have not fully read this book, but I've listened to her presentations on YouTube, and she does a very good job of bringing together biblical. Uh, does a good job of bringing together faith and science. Because as Christians, I think too, sometimes we demonize science.
Yeah.
Sometimes we demonize science, but this is a very good book. There's
Yeah, and
also
there's another one. Oh, I'm
there's
sure another
there's
one. Go
a
ahead.
book that people may not be sure how it relates to depression, but when you have an understanding of boundaries, so it's called
Hmm.
Boundaries
Yeah.
by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Towson. It speaks to how you can govern yourself in a way that separates you from another person, because sometimes we get depressed because we're not able to articulate how the things one person does affect us. In terms of scripture text, my anthem, my text for the year is Philippians 4:8,
Oh,
that talks
yes.
about you must think about the things
Mm,
that are true, pure, honest, honorable, of good report, that are lovely. And I on a daily basis, I look at that scripture from different versions of the Bible, because some versions bring out certain points more.
mm,
I think that's like a guiding text for anybody who is depressed, because when we are depressed, there's this tendency to focus so much about on how we feel, but
mm-hmm.
sometimes you feelings change,
Yep.
but
Mm,
sometimes you can influence how you feel. So think if
mm,
there's something you love, when you focus on something that you really love, you find that there's a corresponding feeling to it, right?
mm-hmm.
So even though you're depressed and you're in that space where you just want to lie down in your bed, cover up with the sheet, try to think about something positive all the time. It would be helpful to get a book like I do and find 5 to 7 things to be grateful for every day.
Yeah.
It forces me to look through all the negative things that are happening and latch on to something good. And you find if you do that constantly, you will start to feel better. Romans 12:2, don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That clause, be he transformed by the renewing of your mind, I really,
Yeah.
really focus on that. There's this scripture there's this
Hey,
sermon I want.
Roxanne, wait, no, but I done them. I done them.
Okay, my bad.
But I don't them yet. So we'll get to more of them. But one of the things I'm reading this book, Roxanne, called Mindset. You probably know it. Mindset. I don't remember the author of it right now on
Mhm.
off the top of my head, but mindset, and it talks about the two types of mindset: the fixed mindset and the growth
Yeah.
mindset. The fixed mindset just focus on what you always know. You're
Mhm.
not willing to change. Your failure for you is like an argument. You use that one you use failures, everything that has gone bad in your life to label yourself. But the growth mindset uses the things that would have not gone so right as a stepping stone. So that book has really, from a secular perspective, it has really done something. And one of the books, I was going through this, I found this book, The Power of Hope. You can find it at IADPA. It's very cheap. I think it's about $200 for it. And this book, it tackles a wide range of things. It tackles anxiety, depression, stress, psychological traumas, enslaved by addiction, the monster within, and tips from the creator. And I found this little book to be one of the most inspiring book because it would have helped me and would have advised me and it supports it with some scriptures as well. So I had around $200. So one of the
And
texts that
if you have the E.G.
mhm,
White app, she has a whole book too on the mind. Let me look for it. The name of the book. So for anybody who has the E.G. White app, the name of the book is Mind, Character, and
character,
Personality.
yeah,
So you
and
can use
you
that.
know,
Yeah.
well, I'm glad you brought up that book because well, I found a very interesting quote from that book, and it says, "For thousands of years, Satan has been experimenting upon the properties of the human mind, and he has learned how to do it well. It is the special work of Satan in these last days to take possessions of the mind of the youth, to corrupt their thoughts and inflame their passion. Satan seeks in all his might to clothe the mind of God's people as a means to bring doubt and despair." So there we have it, that we know for a fact that it is Satan's, because at the end of the day, the mind is what the battle is over. Because whoever has the mind has control.
Mhm.
Whoever And that's a fact. Whoever has the mind has the control. So as we come to the close of today's discussion, I'm going to give Roxanne the final statement for today, and then I'll close off with a Bible passage that can encourage us as we go through life's journey. It's not easy, but it is possible.
Okay, so if I could leave any one thing, it's a two-part one thing. The first one would be, if you are struggling with depression, you are not alone. And when I say you are not alone, I mean you're not alone in the context of there are others who experience depression. I mean, I am talking about mental health and I still experience it. And because I know I need to be in a certain place where I can talk about it, I do, or I try to do. I'm not always consistent, if I should be honest, but I try to do the work that I'm telling people to do. So if that means getting my counseling sessions, listening to positive content that would counter the negatives in my head, just know, say, you're not alone. And I encourage you to read Philippians 4, verse 8, and really, really, really internalize it. I think that when you begin to internalize that particular text, you will find that when you get into these different spaces, different words from the text will jump out at you. You may not remember all the scripture, but you'll just remember stuff like things that are true. So something that is true, God will never leave you or forsake you. God loves you with an everlasting love. That is something that's true. That no change, right? That doesn't change. Things that are pure. Go outside, look on the flowers, observe a cat climbing a tree, something that has that sense of lightness to it. Just internalize the text. I promise you, when you begin to internalize that text, you will begin to experience the difference and understand that experiencing depression doesn't mean that God is any further from you. As a matter of fact,
So time
I
is closest.
think that He's closer to you in those moments because He knows you can't get through it by yourself. So that's it from me.
And my final statement is that admit where you are. It won't be easy because habits are formed over a long period of time, and some habits take a while to get rid of. But when you understand the mindset and wanting to change your mindset day by day, focus on the positives, kick out the negatives, and every time you kick out the negative, try to replace it with something beautiful. And the text that I want to leave with us this evening is from Romans 8:37 to 38, and it says, "For I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any power, no, in all these things, we are more than conqueror through Him who loved us." So until next time, this is Let's Talk Youth. Thank you, Roxanne, for being with us. I want to thank my technical team. Well, it's just Mario. Thank you, Mario, my dear husband, for putting up these things and for controlling the questions on the chat. Until next time, see ya with Roxanne.
Yeah.